A girl with a broken heart can sing a sorrowful song just as well as a bird with clipped wings. She was a porcelain doll, a beautiful little girl with ivory skin and long golden hair that graced her shoulder blades. Her ocean blue eyes entranced the world. She drew them in with a look and a smile. One smile and the world fell in love. A sorceress she seemed, but in truth was nothing but the sort. She wanted to smile, to befriend the world if she could. As long as she knew how to, she wanted to please the world. She knew how to paint her face with rosy red lips and long lashes. She knew how to slim herself to fit the tiniest of dresses, and she knew very well how to entertain. She was an amusement to her fellow peers, parents, professors. And like a marionette, she danced when she was told to dance, smiled when she was told to smile. Oh, sang like a nightingale, she did. The silver strings tugged, and yet her wrists never pained at all. Never a red rash from the constant rubbing. She was happy to please those who she knew. As long as they were happy to play with her, she was happy to be played with. The porcelain doll could play with anyone as long as they didn't break her. And dressed as a princess, she effortlessly fell into the arms of a Prince Charming, a gallantly smiling man a few years above her grade, dashing and devilishly handsome. He too knew how to win over the world. His smile brightened the sun at the beginning of the day. His voice blew across audiences the way the wind would blow through a meadow of daisies. Yet, unlike the porcelain doll, he was the one who told the world how to move, breathe when he breathed, play how he played. He was the master, and the world was the laborer he would prey upon. As rough as his claws had to be, the predatorial tiger was tucked away behind the perfect sun-kissed skin and muscular shell. He was always gentle with her. How could he not be? A dolled-up princess and a prince would grow up together to reign over their kingdom. Together. The porcelain doll had noticed his grin from across the room earlier that afternoon, and she gave a wide smile right back to her prince with no afterthought. There was nothing to contemplate. A smile was a smile, and she knew better than to question an act of such kindness as this. Sincerity. The room was filled to the brim of friendly faces, chatting and conversing with their cohorts, as if they hadn't seen each other in eons. Each and every one of them had been good friends, carefully picked by the porcelain doll and, of course, advised by her prince. The king and the queen, out for a journey into the village, knew nothing of what their doll was throwing. But the prince assured her in the angelic and suave tone he held that everything would be all right. The room full of color felt safe and warm with the energy kept inside of it. But as everyone knew, all good things had to end. The sleeve of night had covered up the sky with little holes for the stars to shine upon the castle. The porcelain princess bid her subjects good night, but little did she know the night was only beginning. She hummed to herself as she cleaned the palace, a spring in her step from the night's previous engagements. Yet a shadow loomed over her. It was soft, gentle at first, a small grasp of her wrist and quiet words infiltrating her ear. She knew at once it was her prince, and although everything in her mind told her she would listen, the offer he spoke was one she could not give him. With a delicate decline, she freed her wrist from his grasp, only to be met with more hands. One touch, then another, and another, until she found a moment to slip away. With the tone any princess would recoil at, she assertively spoke again, a simple no. How foolish she was to think that her prince would take such a word without any retort back. The sweet voice she had only ever heard melodious in her ear turned sour. This was not her prince, but a little boy, dressed in borrowed robes. A temper like a storm, she was thrown onto the coffee table. The queen's vase shattered to pieces. The queen's voice, her mother's face. Looking up to return her own anger for his actions, her skin grew cold. The movie in her mind played out on a roller coaster. It began hastily, the battle between the two sexes. a push and pull in complete opposition, yet she was no match for the brute strength that pulled her hair and tore her clothes. Hands grabbed at her all over. Shoulders, stomach, breast, legs, hair, repeatedly. Striking blows drew shrieks and groans from her mouth and stinging tears from her eyes, and yet she could not move the boulder of a boy. The prince, the beast, had a way of getting what he wanted, whether he offered it or stole it. What the beast wanted was to take something from her, and he took. He took and he took and he took until there was nothing left but a quivering mess beneath him. Long ago, the girl's voice had grown hoarse and her eyes ran dry. Long ago, she had stopped calling for any knights to come to her rescue, and the moment it was over, she received no consolation except for the isolation of a castle all to herself as the beast journeyed home. A porcelain doll, broken. The king and queen arrived home in a flurry of rage that the princess could only match to the temporal invasion she had just felt upon her own body. Unsteady on her own 2 feet, she begged for the regal parents to hear her tale. The royalty had come to their own conclusion without the little girl's help, though. What they had seen was a violation of their trust. A ball thrown in their castle, of which the reckless princess had neglected to even clean up before their arrival. Clambering to the ground, she gathered the pieces of the broken vase into her hands, cradling the items with such care. After all, she knew exactly how they felt that moment. Pleading and pleading, she tried to explain to the monarchy what had happened. Pale with grief and filled with a frustration unimaginable to the mind, the king and the queen shut their daughter away to the dungeon until they could figure out what to do with her. A princess set to battle in her own home was sentenced for defeat, and a porcelain doll was perfect no more. What had she become? It didn't take long to make the realization. If he was a beast disguised as a prince, she must not be a princess. A princess would have never been submitted to what she endured. Unable to fit the title, she set her ball gowns and tiaras away for sweatshirts and sweatpants, for they felt warm, comfortable, and safe. Even in her isolation, she could feel some comfort with herself. Yet if she was not a porcelain princess, what was she? Her prison sentence continued outside her home tenfold. The beast, with his unctuous words of decree, had claimed she had thrust herself upon him in a maelstrom of desire, over and over and over again. Those little words, so small, had flown through the school with no doubt of belief, and so the porcelain doll felt the cracks in her skin as she walked down the hallway. Insults and slurs were carved into her as sharp as a blade, as sharp as his claws. She had no choice but to fold herself like a flower reversing its bloom. When words continued to poke and prod at her, she fell into her own little world. She would fiddle with her sweater sleeve and close her eyes during lessons to shut out the others. There she could compose symphonies in her mind. Carefully crafted letters she would never really write. She shut out the torturous memories of the attack and resided to the comforts of her own mind palace. As long as she was in her mind palace, she was safe. But the taunting didn't stop in her home or her school. As time passed and the seasons changed, she grew exhausted by what she heard. Although she would still wake up in the middle of the night, startling in panic, or would feel her heart race every moment she saw the beast in the hallways, she couldn't stand the pounding of useless and terrible words against her skull. She was not a slut. She didn't ask for it or enjoy it, and it wasn't enough to disregard the notion of boys will be boys. She was tired of the laughter and the snickering and the way the world had told her to behave. Unlike the submissive little porcelain princess, the porcelain doll was ready to become a warrior. But one couldn't become a warrior overnight, especially a little girl made of breakable china. Instead, much like training for battle, she did her research. She found other little porcelain girls such as her, and together they went from porcelain to paper, to leather, and finally to glass. And glass may not look strong, but it is reflective of every insult ever given. Taunt the glass, and it will bounce right back at you. Glass in the right light can expose even the darkest shadows for what they truly are. The warriors grew up from little girls to women, looking for their voice to be heard. They searched high and low for the justice they deserve, the apologies they needed, and the way to stop what had happened to them for others, once and for all. And they're still looking